remember stuff like that.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to pause record. Okay. So welcome everybody to this reading sponsored by Chax Press of these two amazing artists. And as I have said, as other people were already here, we'll have some information up for those who might want to purchase books which are on sale only till tomorrow morning. Are they on a super duper sale? I'm being a capitalist here today. Buy books, buy poetry books. But in terms of introductions of the poets, I thought the ads, promotions for this reading had bios on them. The bios are everywhere. I'm just going to read one short paragraph from people I admire from the backs of each of their Chax books, because I think they speak not only to that particular book, but in both cases to their work in general. So Adam is going to read first, and let me just read something from Andrew Joran, who writes, "The supernova blaze of Adam Cornford's poetry fuses surrealism, science, politics, and eros to yield exotic particles of meaning rarely found on Earth. Cornford's vision, like that of Blake, overleaps the dark satanic mills of commodity culture to discover a utopia that can only be imagined by radical imagery. Here, language becomes a semiotic multiverse, proliferating toward an emancipated future. With this long-awaited major collection, that's Lalia, the book, Cornford affirms his place among that visionary company of poets empowered to chant the re-enchantment of word and world." Please welcome Adam Cornford. Adam, you have to unmute yourself.
I did.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. This poem was written while I was living in the Southern California desert, about 60 miles north of Mexico, and feeling disconnected. And it was a prompt from a Berkeley poet called Janny Dresser. So I felt I needed some prompts to get going again. It's called Connected. Last of all by air, ceaseless tide running the channel of my windpipe, in and out of the lungs' weedy pools, by microbial traffic filling every pore, billions living between my own big nucleated cells, those self-replicating precision machines, like mice in a factory, vast migrations through my gut, two-way infiltrations of my skin, not just by the bacteria, whose genius is multitude and mistake, coating me inside and out, but viruses, bees of RNA pollen, bring news from everywhere, from back down my short species twig of the bushy tree of life, then past apes, lemurs, tree shrews, amphibians, fish, trilobites, segmented worms, to the archaea building towers around volcanic vents, to the deep, hot crush of oceans 3 billion years ago. Enabling me to know this, the intricate lichen folds of my neocortex connect with a great invisible forest, language, the semiotic multiverse, through ears, eyes, and finger touch on this machine to planetary networks, and before all else, the quantum fields that are every atom, boson, lepton I consist of, trading light and spreading out to the ever-vanishing horizon of the universe, with diminishing odds of me being anywhere but here, alone in a house in the desert. And this is another bit of physics. It's after a lecture by Richard Feynman called Universal Gravitation, an Example of Physical Law. It's called Gravity's Angels, because he mentions that Kepler thought that angels were needed to keep the planets on course, because Newton hadn't arrived yet with the laws of motion. So I thought this is a little exercise in theology. Gravity's angels. To make us travel along closed curves, ellipses, as Kepler understood, angels were needed. The timeless beat of their wings on space, of their angular feathers, pushes all worlds together. So many angels, we mistake them for clouds furring the planet's curvature, its cone of shadow their wake as they press inward against sunlight. Nothing desires to fall, to converge. It wants to keep going. Angels lean us into our seats and shoes, tug our skins downward, lead us toward the center of the earth. After so many years of falling into scalding nickel iron cores of each other, God made the angels. The angels assembled galaxies, then stars, then planets. All the while, though, hidden inside the atom hells, unpredictable demons worked hunched over. Inside the twisted and splintered space God left behind for them after the very start of things, they bind sullen-browed nuclei, frantic electrons leaping away like souls toward connection. Crushed wasp-like in the cores of suns, tumbled through nebulae, demons are water's architects and snows. They sculpt the proteins, they, the nerve gardeners, foresters in bone. And all the while, stars go through their graceful motions. The moon falls faultlessly past the horizon every time. Angels get all the credit. God, with regret, made the demons. The demons make worlds out of infinitesimal crisscross of force, flame blur of probability. He made the angels. The angels push worlds together, making them drop away from the straight lines they were traveling in, into God's finally dully differential loops. Where they would go and why, till the angels took over, not even God, the single true circle, understands. That unknowingness is only circumference. Sometimes, along that sensitive edge, he feels a straight line, widthless and burning coldly to him, like O of absolute zero uncurled into infinity's eye, tangent at every point to his arc. It's a highway where a traveler is always already passing, on the move from before the beginning to after the end. And in keeping with my quantum physics obsessions, this is a poem about love and the history of radio. It's called The Airwaves. I recall, as I wait for her call, the RKO Pictures Tower, thousands of miles tall, a colossus of black girders astride the North Pole of the radio-shrunken globe, sending out concentric ripples of Morse code, RKO. How radio masts in Betty Boop and Popeye cartoons shot big zigzag waves of signal down into the sets, each console flailing and bouncing with the music amid the rubbery furniture of cartoon living rooms, stretching their speaker grills into toothy mouths to yell the announcer's excitement or the demagogue's rant, extending a radio arm to grab one listener and shake her, a lightning-wristed fist to punch another in the face. Laughter, fear, gluttony, tenderness, ambition, curiosity, all these profitable signals over the public airwaves, leased to broadcasting corporations with patriotic names, American, Columbia, National, tall and imposing as the gray-ribbed fortress towers of WPA federal buildings. Airwaves, meaning frequencies peak to sinoid peak in the oscillator, the bright serpent without end, undulating waves in the ether, bearing words, notes, and sound effects, scattering into it like bright, tiny drops of information. No matter that Einstein, Bohr, and Heisenberg explained why there was no ether after all, for the Ripley waves to travel through. Instead, waves of likeliness and unlikeliness entered the Philco and Electrolux boxes in stiff living rooms and steamy kitchens where only humans were animate, their ears tuned to speaker buzz. Out of the boxes with their dials and flickering lights emerged actual airwaves, waves of sound mysteriously turned by vibrating grains of carbon in the diaphragms into electrons flowing down a wire, then transformed by glowing diodes full of nothingness, countless little glass Saracen helmets for incandescent ghosts, uttering airwaves that are waves not of air but of Newton's particles of light, passing invisibly through walls and bodies, bringing their own news. For Newton's particles, radiant, unseen, are Einstein's immortal and fungible photons, the reserve currency of the universe, the original waves from 14 billion years ago, always waving goodbye. No matter how fast we are moving, seeing, thinking, or talking, the airwaves are faster than the announcer spilling soap, motor oil, borax, empire, and of course, radios. The airwaves of swing bands, Father Coughlin and FDR, the blues, the shadow, and the Grand Ole Opry, waves of poverty, pain, music, and fantasy revenge, waves of rhetorical breath and sentimental harmony. Speaker pressure waves pressed the brains of listeners into brain waves, the winged word riding the waved air, that is not even emptiness, that is doubt. Yet the certainty of American and Jesus and C major still today rides on waves of uncertainty as the photons move through every possible path to their destinations, their paths inscribed in twiggy diagrams of QED, branching across an infinite number of universes, but always choosing the exact, precise instant we inhabit. On the air, cramped and padded studios, oak podiums with diamond and club and spade-shaped microphones floated on curving air, on its waves, an invisible ocean, whose ripple reflective surface is the ionosphere. Signals leapt up from it like flying fish to the stars, or in shoals darted down to the other side of the world. Short waves made waves in crystals that feed earphones from kit radios amid popular science and baseball cards, Spanish, Hindi, Afrikaans, and each boy's night skull. Cryptic voices surged and crisscrossed on static swish, airless airwaves whose ripples radiate weaker and weaker out into the black vacuum of the cosmos. Today's airwaves are full of conversations, text, images, messages thought to be private, phone to tiny phone, ringtones like raindrop rings on pond after pond after pond, connected, delivered, replicated, and reproduced by towers, satellites, negotiating, passing on the signals in ripples of zeros and ones. The electrons now racing through logic gates and conduits too small to reflect light as anything but a noise cloud of broken waves, take every possible path to their destinations, and each bit the gate measures, defines our universe. So, a woman's voice, hoarse with exhaustion and longing, arrives in my ear from the far departure gate through which she will depart for here after so many hours. There, snow observed by light from the big night window flickers into existence, descending like silent static on wind waves, and is gone as her cracked, sweet whisper of my name falls through me, airwaves to waves of wanting synapse. It's the coming collapse of the wave function into a single solution, her arrival soon from the other side of the air, setting her bags down as she leans into my arms. The poem is called DMV, and in California, that stands for Department of Motor Vehicles. If I were writing this poem where I now live in Pennsylvania, it would be called PennDOT, because that's what which stands for Department of Transportation. But this is about waiting to be seen at the Department of Motor Vehicles. Backs to the wall are two lines of black plastic chairs, waving, rippling, but nearly stationary like a score composed of seated bodies, pairs or triplets leaning their heads together to murmur, or isolates leaning forward, fingering tiny screens or a book's pages. The score changes slowly, as some stand and shuffle to a gap in the glass partition under a black number where a blank clerk waits while the system's mechanical angel chants, "Now serving," alphanumeric, "at window number," digits, as if opening a gate of flowers for each ticket holder who will arrive clutching the filled out forms, plastic card or cash. Many are here to gain or regain their encoded transactional selfhood, their permission to pilot a private steel capsule through flat space-times, highly regulated yet competitive, dull yet murderous, where dark energy flows from proximity to expand phobic distance. To be close is to be at risk. Every other driver head is a singularity, a face box whose decision outputs beyond the event horizon of metal and tinted glass must be predicted. Here, heads and their bodies, work tired or workless, in drab jeans, windbreakers, tights, line up as if at lights or signs, or simply at clogs or stoppages in the multi-channel network that moves each one like a data packet among earn state, pay state, and rest state. Heads, their bodies, faces, so many shades of brown, tan, amber, pale, all view the same promises rescinded, options foreclosed into decaying orbits of roads and days, which is why some now, forced to idle in administrative traffic on their way to a window, turn to face each other through stranger space, as if through lane space, stepping invisibly out of their stalled vehicles of personal necessity. Some still sleek, some battered, but all engineered like make and model around different price points, around different income, gender, education, skin tone, data points connectable through the alphanumerics on each license into an n-dimensional dummies of zeros and ones designed to define them. They, now talking, joking, raise a tiny commons like a scarlet tent on identity's factory floor. Now this one, I'm dedicating in this reading to Alice, because back a ways, she published two truly astonishing books. One, I thought about reading the poem, which from The Descent of Alette, where she set out to make an epic in which the protagonist was a woman, not a man. Just formally, the poem it's called The Exquisite Corpse in the New Wine, if you ever get the book. But that was very directly inspired by Alice's work. But it's long, it's 11 and a half minutes long, so I decided not to read it. It's also gnarly and complicated and full of physics and astrophysics and stuff about string theory, so I kind of let that one ride. But she also, the other book was called Desamere, and it's a dialogue of a kind with the surrealist poet Robert Desnos, who has always been one of my favorite surrealist poets since I first encountered him in my early 20s. He did something that none of the other surrealist poets did. He wrote narratives in these kinds of visionary landscapes that he created. The direct inspiration for the poem also came from a movie by Guillermo del Toro, who's one of my favorite directors. I like his early horror films a lot. It's called Philosophical Panorama for Guillermo del Toro and for Alice, because without Alice, this poem would not have happened. At sunset, the line of hills undulates like a lazy signal in the infrared, and behind them, curtain behind gray curtain, paling the mountains, cordilleras, fluttering with infinite slowness in the geological wind, like worn muslin, the strata exposed and angled near vertical, a decor of ghosts, the ancient shells hanging in the tatter and weave. Even the sky is veined and streaked with evening like weathered wood, as if the entire landscape were facing you inside a vast open crate. Atop weathered wooden tables, nearer at hand, conclusions are displayed in uneven rows, cardinal red and white folded around each other, furled like flayed pig ears or artificial damask roses of painted steel. 12 ponderous men in black suits are reaching the tables now in an uneven file. You do not wish to be walking in step, yet they are. They stride up one at a time to inspect these results, their square faces pale as fly leaves in the volumes of old leather-bound monographs, their certitudes protruding from their taut jaws like black cheroots. Behind the men and the white village, the line of the hills darkens, the slow massed whispers of the indeterminate woods advancing down into the valley as twilight deepens and shaggy clouds converge yellow-eyed with innumerable paired fire balloon lanterns hovering as if they scented the intellectual blood about to be spilt below. Each man takes a conclusion to press to his muscular, well-fed chest. Tongue-like blades and articulate rods glide out of its little sliding doors and dart between the man's ribs under his formal suit and shirt. Swiftly, the conclusions rearrange the internal workings of the men into logics that feed themselves, like Klein bottles carved of muscle. Vertiginous gulfs in the men's interiors open in hail like sea caves, so that the idiot village of white blocks is hypnotized by this emptiness. The houses cubical with black iron trellises and brackets, holding impacts where unbearable wishes have struck the layered belief structures. Blood geraniums and poppies decorating blank black windowed walls. All the windows are open on evening, and the women look out from rooms where they have been preparing the dream sleep of reason. Hair streaming down their backs, then lifted by the tectonic breeze, like hydrographic maps of underground streams in the limestone twilight. They cease their contemplation of oniric objects and turn toward you. Silent, wide-eyed, the women watch you and the men who stand swaying like poplars, like demons, in the fiery uprushing music of their involution, as they lift the blood-stained conclusions to their lips and kiss them before collapsing in on themselves, folding to red origami and vanishing, leaving behind the formal syllogisms of their empty suits and shirts. Now doubt lifts a colorless arch over the village like ice around the moon. Before dawn, it will be overgrown with vines from the split conclusions, and under it the children will dance awkwardly in their nightgowns until the white cottages are tossed in the huge hand of night like dice and thrown down onto the gray-grained, weathered wood of this world. Children lead their mothers and grandmothers from the cottages out into suspension of belief and disbelief, where your contradictions ripple and fold into each other as cloud layers and mountain strata fuse, where beyond them the sun is about to split open like a pomegranate, forescattering the trillion incandescent crimson tears of probability. How am I doing on time, Charles? I have no idea. Oh, I can't hear you. Hang on a sec. Text me.
Another 10 minutes, something like that?
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Something I do if I really love the work of a poet is to try to do something now that connects with what they did formerly. I've always loved the work of Hart Crane. Ever since I encountered it on my father's bookshelf, in which he inherited the book from my grandmother. It was one of those tremendous Louis Untermeyer anthologies. I don't know if you ever saw any of those. And it had Hart Crane in it, including a whole bunch of the bridge and some of the shorter poems. And this was inspired by seeing the sardine swarm that's in the Monterey Bay Aquarium, in the big water column that they have in the aquarium, among a whole bunch of seaweed and stuff. And I'd never seen a bunch of sardines swimming before. So it's called Sardine Machine for Hart Crane. They shoal in sweep formation, swarming gleam with tail flick wave through smooth curve like a wrist, volplaning, pivots, wheels, quick tinfoil streamline motion shines a mirror-clouded twist. Up spiraling, the myriad uncoils wide, slowly to merge, a heart form of barbed glass in ripple assembly, pours to hanging glide, mingling of angles and bright matrix mass. Then, turning, round side eyes, a chorus line of sight, a startled vision multiplies. Unarmed armada, designerless design of silver seraph unison, you replicant rise around no throne but hungers, endless flight, breeding in tiny metonymies of light. I wasn't expecting to write an actual sonnet, but I did. Okay. What did I have next? Yeah, this came also from living in the desert during the California drought. And I suppose it's an eco poem. It's called What the Rain Said. After so long dry, after fire floods washing forests to ash, erasing paradise, this numberless choral whisper of blessing, after so long unheard, the language foreign but familiar, the sound myriad momentary fingers delicately but persistently touching the earth, a grandmother's withered cheek, asking, are you okay? Then, as I drive under pigeon gray sky over hiss of wet desert dust in the wheeled herd, pumping yet more burnt breath into saturated air, slaps and slaps my glass face. Fool! Across the highway in shallow dips, runoff makes mirrors in which we still don't see each other. We still don't see ourselves, our scorched diminishing leafage of futures, our 12 years left. Only pouring sky, a false forever. Outside now, as I gaze up, my own eyes wet with the unspeakable question, I speak in silence. Ancient, always new giver, how many more times will you return to us? Far off under traveling clouds, in the cities, the crowding young with their sun banners crest the avenues. To them, storm reiterates the signal given the tough dryland seeds. Now, grow now. Sorry, it always chucks me up to read that one, because the place it came out of hurt. Okay, what do we got left here? Yeah, related. It's called dark energy. Not the physical meaning of the term. Dark energy. Black inhuman plumes of entropy ascend from bombed Iraq wells and exploded tanker cars in Quebec, which I could just as well say Iowa or Ohio. Great black snake sways its many-eyed head as it tries to find a way south from boreal tar desolation past Lakota drum shields. Black coal soot coating the earth's lungs, paling to ghost gray and pink coughing froth as all Beijing becomes a forbidden city. Capital, intelligent black cancer swirling in the eyes of executives, commands them to create Venus climate in the skies of Gaia. Blackness invisible in well-lit rooms and cubicles rises through the floors to form face-eating mirrors like liquid obsidian. Despair transmute to viridian light in alembic hearts as voice crowds face down the black uniforms of planet-wide extinction. Energy of convection flows between black outer robe and white inner robe of a Bedou woman soaked in sun. Okay. I guess we're down to about 5 minutes. Okay, I got a couple of little ones. And these, because I don't have a printer at the moment, are in my phone in Google Docs. So it's gonna take me a second to get to them. Let's see. Docs, here we are. Just need a quick drink of water. Orion. Why this one chance arrangement of stars in the cold season inscribed again and again into my lines across a half century? Appearing there, a faraway giant of gleams, icy and alien, above the observatory as my mother was dying, or a virtual skeleton striding motionless over a rust-littered, dead-wired species graveyard. But year by year, the same huge graph traced between bright points, Old companion I welcome above the horizon after the October machine grinds down cooling light into dusk sooner each day. Met you at 17, my own modern bones grown in 1 year, so long but still narrow, the arms and legs extended, the rib cage wider and deeper for fire balloon lungs, short torso, muscles like pulleys just under skin. And in the tall skull, a drive to run. Pattern long ago adapted to loping over wide wind-rivered grasslands, veldt, steps, javelins in his fist, 3 obsidian knives, black glinting in his rawhide belt, tireless, patient gait after antelope, red deer, wild curl-horned cattle, going the distance, all the way to the day's kill, his archaic anatomy recombinant in me after 40,000 years. Not after prey, but around a cinder track at dusk or on wet fallow footpaths under beeches, oaks, eucalyptus, I ran. No goal but going the distance, muscles, foot bones burning, breathing late light, a half-century of motion. Now slowed, an easy, steady stride, my best pace when failed toe arches, worn down right hip joint allow. Would he still at my age live, my forebear? Foot bones splayed, teeth eroded to stumps by chewing sinew, after so many suns, wrinkles all over a field diagram of his energies, resisting earth pole and losing, as I am too. Though still by the fire teaches the hunting songs to runner boys, adding perhaps a song or part of one. I would want no better twilight. Your image risen, ascending stillness above black mountain skyline, your own horizon, the galaxy's edge, like faint snowlight from a distant, unending forest. When the time comes, Death River, bear me to the region of the winter stars. And I think I've got room for one more. Or are we done? Okay. Okay. This is from the book. And so the significance of colors can change a lot. And this one feels timely. It's called To See the Black Angel at the time of the assault on Gaza, 2008-9. And I will just say that already Israeli quote unquote defense forces have killed in the West Bank over, just in February, by February this year, they've killed 700 Palestinians. And a lot of those were kids. To see the black angel, not descending from heaven, but risen, still incandescent out of the earth's core and the opening of hell, swan diving upward, a neural fire arrow through the sullen mantle and ancient seabed, then the villages and stones of Palestine, Israel, leaving a hollow stem of glass like lightning's return stroke, a gush of terrene blood in the shape of a woman. To see the black angel cooling as she ascends over scrub trees and low hills, scatters of wreckage, burnt out trucks, eviscerated homes, fragments of char and bone, brass and depleted uranium, broken asphalt, then layers of night air, thermals upthrusting into the Father's cool vault, slow motion drift of planets, freeze frame of galaxies. To see the black angel as her wings widen, feathered with overlaid night, glinting like Aztec blades, she soars above the cities of men, cooling to perfect black, black smooth as obsidian, agile as latex, remorseless as iron, streamlined as orca, her hair long streamers of ink, her eyes fumaroles, her breasts like the spaces around a star's core, her sex a singularity, parting like seed into new physical laws, her lips in a terrible smile. To see the black angel swinging a flail of sparks as she swoops low over rooftops. Her flail reaches down, fine, bright as Medusa tendrils, through sleeping ceilings of tenements and shelters, into beds, into bodies. Women stir beside men as the fire knots brush them from the midpoint of their spines behind the solar plexus. News travels in all directions, up to the brain and its eyes, down to the womb, out to the calloused feet, the meticulous fingers. To see the black angel watching the women's skulls, room by room, street by street, hut by shack by torn tent, strung lanterns fluxing with glow, as cortical zones become active, designs for infernal machines sketched in neon 3D, as their vulvas flicker into fuchsias of wet flame, their hips remember to be palaces, their hearts flex and stretch, immense paradoxical demons winged with violet vessels. To see the black angel passing over all, sparing none, so the women dream of smiles like dark birds on their lips, girl-full, mother-pursed or crone-fissured. They dream of men kneeling, begging forgiveness, of tears in men's eyes like a tide as the angel passes over, of knives fallen like leaves, machine pistols and RPGs abandoned among the stones by the Father's armies. To see the black angel with the terrible smile, her flail knotted with light, making the women dream of filling the streets, immense flocks of birds crowding over the rubble, over stain maps of blood, past cars twisted, scorched, the skulls of dogma. They dream of governments and parties imploding like bomb-struck buildings, blast waves in reverse, time's arrow like the angel flung backward from the Omega. To see the black angel passing over, moving on, as the women dream of power and of waking to make it. They dream of all the lords, lords of oil and mirrors, of smoke and water, lords of light and money, of love and shadow. In Tel Aviv, Washington, London, Beijing, Riyadh, of all these lords descended by sighing elevators from their armored heavens, shrunk into men trembling in expensive rags. As all those they used for so long dance with mouths open, drinking solar wine. To see the black angel when hell reclaims the world as a forest of branching flame, a garden of unbound spirits, every leaf, every root holy under the oxygen eyes of Gaia, into whose body the angel has returned, black as abandoned veils, as the inside of touch, a drop of black ink abruptly silvered by a four-dimensional mirror in the shape of a woman striding taller than thought itself, whose face reflects the unbounded in the faces of all the living on earth.
Thank you, Adam. It was beautiful and incredible. I think about what Will Alexander wrote of your work, dazzling with lingual texture as vision, but it's equally dazzling with vision as lingual texture. Okay, I am going to pause recording and take like a 3-minute break. You can fill your glass of water or coffee or wine, whatever you may be doing, or you can visit the chax.org website and find the sales on these books, but it will be a very short break, just like 3 minutes, maybe it'll take 4 minutes. Thank you. Okay. All right, thank you again, everyone, for coming. It's great to see so many friends here. And so we're gonna keep on going. Just as I read a quote about Adam's work from Andrew Joron, and keeping with the Jors, I'm going to read something about Alice's work by Pierre Joris, and who says, among other things, that about once a year, the new Notley book comes out like a reliable great wine. And he said about the book Chax published some years ago now, that this is an immense book, one in which Notley takes language as she has it from hearsay to heresy, by the speed and awe of an unwavering attention to the seams, three different kinds of seams of words and sentences. This is the work of an iconoclast, a semioclast, where semantics become seam antics, and the biz antics and antiques from Christianity to Christine are molten down and recast into 21st century mental shapes in the red-hot, heart-red retort of a present-day alchemist of mind. Alice Notley has the uncanny ability to go from the everyday mundane to the psychocosmic in one warp speed stutter or typographical stumble at what André Breton called la vitesse grand vie. This is writing of the highest order. That's from Pierre Joris. And Alice, we welcome you. It's great to have you here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. It's nice to be here. I am, and thank you, Adam. That was a great reading. I'm going to read one poem from Reason and Other Women, and then I'm going to read from these two books, which came out last Tuesday. So, actually, I have 3 books this year so far. That's the wrong poem. This is a very beloved by me book, Reason and Other Women, published by Chax in 2010. I wrote it in the 90s, and I worked on it for a long time. So this is a poem called The City Drifting. I gave myself to, and day and night were paint. Give self, saint said to that paint. I wasn't paint and couldn't stay in painting. The best of the icons, a different prop or proposition were inside me in their pieces like things one might fall into heap of a summary, return to an earlier page or age of this ongoing presentation of an absolute I is absolute and contingency is another. I would never listen to the ravings of such an age as mine. How much emotion do I owe it? To what extent might I consent to it emptying, for it emptying my absolute self? For it is the question haunting me, I who am a ghost, haunt the crystal city, which is the bond uniting all of us beloved ghosts dead and living with our knowledge. Not how much do I owe of whatever we decide there is, or you brilliant philosophers holding colloquia over whoever is the last killed saint. I write an old, and my former friends will never harm me here in this city on this page. The boy says, you didn't tell me how much I didn't know. You never told me what it meant to prefer one dead comedian to another one. And there seems to be so much subtlety involved, and a sense one has rooted down, roots, so differently. If one prefers one to another, I didn't know I should have preferred the red skeleton. We should have settled on a story for me long ago, if only so I could leave it later. You should have told me which comedian I was supposed to prefer. If I was I, everyone else knows who they're supposed to. Oh, I say to him, you are absolute, and your preferences are of no consequence. The story shifts in the first world about you all the time. Stay clear of it, stay clear. Perhaps you, yes, preferring the basic bones of the soul, as I am an old haunt, you know, whose job is to love without consenting to contingency, contrary to what the saint said. She wasn't saint. After all, I ride my own saint. The 2 women, my 2 friends on the bridge, were drunk with their saintliness, that is, drunk, and not saintly. Saints tend to cross bridges rather hurriedly, not dawdling, bragging and dawdling, as if always on the way. I have let my body go stiff with anger again and stress, have shouted into the dead night well and stretched my voice long and taught for no reason, blood in eye. A lizard, a snake, I'm in charge of my soul becomes length, calling out to the unprecious noise, unlove it, there is much to unlove. You know, I am a nearly extinct animal whose job it is to surface, to speak, and to careful. or to care for, to be full of care, for in my red shirt and fur, in my 4-digited extensions surfacing from the rectangular pond in the beautiful swamp of the Salonia, where we once saw a huge city of ants in the flickering sunlight late day, near water smell of damp, smell of dust. There was a heron nearby and ducks with their wild eyes. My soul's eyes are inhuman, also inhuman in the way of being unaffected by nuance. Your nuances, I will go out to teach darkness again this evening, not teach it as different from light. I will not teach difference at all. I will not discuss gender. It is irrelevant to the discussion at hand or at paw. I will not teach difference at all. I will not teach the ménage à trois, so demeaning to the third and so empowering to the king and the queen. I will go out to ride to enter an old door measured by the dimensions of the last killed saint. Sometime in the 80s, I was killed. I don't even have copies. Do I need them in this cloistering swamp among the mosaics which entertain my ineffableness? No more bridges, no more hard faces. Remember the time just across the borderline when all faces were benign for a moment, because I saw the stream of traffic, walking traffic at a different pace, the pace of stillness. All were vulnerable, but I am not, have never been, and that's why I'm always of use. Disgusting, isn't it? And this hard tone is nothing if not soulful. I am watching and deploying, or I am watching and letting my agencies like reason and justice deploy these words. I, the soul, am not a small, hard core. I am absolute, like the white spider extensions of a cataract across the eye of a medium, partly a fake, no doubt, but sometimes in touch with the haunts like those milky extensions. Mine invisibly reach out to yours and yours to join into the bond of the city. Whether you're hearing me here or not, I would touch all, any, though I tend to prefer, they say, the soul doesn't prefer. I am perhaps tainted too much by my prior existence in the first world, but I tend to prefer petty criminals, old adolescent boys in trouble, babies, the parentless of whatever age. Everyone needs this. Do careful. And the others are here with talents and so on. There is no talent but reason in this crystal city. I am teaching you reason, or are you teaching me reason? All of you voiceful creatures in the darkness of what is called night, and which is not different from light. My guest, my class guest, is Lady Reason, and her baby called Care or Love, who was the woman with soft copper hair. I ask, was she myself? And Reason replies, she's gone. And all such ways of thinking self, you will always care for others, being absolute yourself. There is nothing to be afraid of in this city. These two books just came out from another small press, Fonograf Editions. This one is called Early Works, and it's all works I wrote in my 20s. It's my first 4 published books, plus some unpublished poems. And this is a 600-page poem called the Speak Angel series, composed of 6 books. It's over 600 pages. So I'm going to read some poems I wrote when I was 20 and some poems I wrote between 2013, the beginning of 2013 and the end of 2016. It's a long narrative poem, this one. But first, these very difficult for me to read poems because I wrote them when I was in my 20s. I just picked out a handful to read that I thought I could find the voice for, but I am 25, 26, 27 in these poems. Sweet Robin, let us remember the past I'm pregnant of. So think at its window, you taking a shower, cutlass crass and all. In the basement, Fred Astaire says, my father's just wondering when you're going to give back his Pernod and harpsichord. Now, no more daft leprechauns down there. The history of art is hilarious enough, but I think the nun's pitch is still bothering you. Playful like money? Rather, salvation cannot be planted like a tree It sings to me a bellied gibberish song. Sweet robin dead, harpsichordless labor, heart's mirror rings on. Three, I'm so weak, and rain again instead of noble anger. I cry some and talk like a fish underwater and little bubbles, words breaking. Because we love each other, noble stands against each other are out of the question, not of the question. Everyone's crying today, the baby and I, the sea is the sky. Emerging out of another spell, there's a circle, concentric circles like bangle bracelets slipping over in and out of each other. Maybe I'm supposed to spend this life finding out about not succeeding. No, I don't believe like that yet. I'm writing, holding a baby, and I realize myself, I haven't a self, and me wanting to impress you with my universal and wise and crystalline, beautiful flowering and form. Oh, my person. My person is smears of prints from all the touchings, layers of prints right down to the one fist of crystal. I mean the one that smashes through like death and power. 2 for November. 1. Remembering Novembers, all the Novembers are this leafy room, and I'm the one in the carriage. Over the rustle and under the rustle of leaves, under the sky flowing, I'm the one. I'm a solemn, solemn baby, and nobody the baby, and I'm the nobody pushing the baby. We float through gold leafy rooms, almost enough. It's almost when it was enough. We search each other out via oceanic eyes. No, we're just taking a walk, and we're almost home, and the silver handle is cold in my hands, and I'm tired of flowing blue and gold. 2. All music when you come, but to be released, too short a day for later, when the various rains will come, when the size and weight of it will be known, when intelligence will be brilliance, more radiance, when I am the world's light as you, when I have wrenched out all my substance. Then I can sit on the porch with my baby in the bronzed autumn light. That was me and Anselm. Clouds. Smoky clouds against blue sun, light and not dense or with center, apparently, but they roll across and rain sporadically. The wind splays and lifts the rain into prickly spray, and red berries translucence with orange inside it, and leaves a pointy, dry yellow-green don't penetrate edged the air, but spread in it. Afternoon is the way half of the world says good morning. His short hair stuck out, a cloud of points, brown, light brown, color that doesn't exist for hair, the color of the ceiling light on it and the goldish in it, and the flesh of the face glowing too, that goes with it, and the blue sweater that blazes up to become its shadows. Can I get caught outside what I see? Is it dark or light there? Anything I'm not in is flat. Like that dark window's house through the window. Actually, it's a solid and irregular something hedron tripartite, and part juts towards me full of air, only air. Then they'll come home, lights, and move around, a tiny intimacy that yellowly envelops the globe. Written on Ted's typewriter. What a funny typewriter. The sun building binds chrysanthemums, yellow, white, pressed into the paper. November again, not rich, not poor, but spent seemingly. How have the birthday, the sun promises, harsh prettiness, the kind that takes you into the outer space that is back home in the white and sun-edged typewriter, Olympian, and shadow maps in carpet and chair, by being in and out of light, being in the light only.
Stop. Alice, you got muted unintentionally. Can you unmute?
Okay.
I got
you muted me.
Mute everybody, and I didn't mean that to include you, but it did.
Ah, so what did you miss?
About a minute.
Well, I'm going to go on anyway, because I don't know what you missed. The most avant-garde. The young blonde girl says, since we are the most avant-garde, we should go naked to the dance. I'm agreeable, and now she and I are naked at the dance. No one's interested in my being naked, only in her being naked, 17 and heavy-breasted. Now I'm dancing with someone but wearing a long green dress. It and the dance are beautiful, both somewhat stiff, but I am innocent of stiffness. An older man whom I love enters. I ask him to dance. He puts on his red fez and very solemnly and formally dances with me. Untitled. Where the water swirled and boiled under the shadow of a high-cut bank, some dim thing rose above the surface, then slowly sank and disappeared. He could not see it plainly. It might have been one of the people who live in the dark, deep places. He prayed to them also and dropped a sacrifice to them. Do not harm me, he said. Let me pass over your waters in safety. Dear dark continent, the quickening of the palpable coffin fear, so then the frantic doing of everything experience is thought of. But I've ostensibly chosen my family so early, as is done always, as it would seem always. I'm a 2, now 3 irrevocably. I'm wife, I'm mother, I'm myself and him, and I'm myself and him and him. But isn't it only I in the real whole long universe, alone to be in the whole long universe? But I and he makes ghosts of I and all the he's there would be, won't be, because by now I am he, we are I am we. We're not the completion of myself, not the completion of myself, but myself through the whole long universe. Poem. Now, the havoc-caused soul occurs, not recovers. Yet the treatment bought with submission, fiddles, and caricatures contains nothing but heel intoxication. Courage is intoxication, wide and embedded stalactite in the fall of snow. So he winds a sheet around me, which must be sarong and song. He asks, can I protect myself? I say I'm aware of my self-inviolability. He says he means, can I grease a car? For everyone must run a race in the body's own running place. Running's itself's pure pleasure. I begin to overtake myself, and suddenly I was first at the end of the race, along with everyone else. For we are all in college to learn to marry. The winding dragon of night and horses of day and hummingbird motes of light and the dragon of the night. In black dress will be the lady in a silver vest, or it's black against which looms the lighter black tree loom. One steps on a rusty nail, disbelieves in lockjaw. One thinks forever without a thought. Telephone poles, the railroad tracks, the same, and the same silver clack. Telephone wires, the luminous lines of the world on which I walk. Bare feet and foggy-footed spiders, see the spider toe dance on its tender tendril legs across my hand, shimmering moat with room comfort, room service, silver artifice, and uprightness, and arrows a lily's an arrow, blank yellow with red, blank. I weep, I read novels. Someday I'll count all your freckles. Bagatelles of transient experience, a different one always dies, whose name seems forgotten, a sacred thread blows away. My rags of righteousness are all your heroism, your social charm, your wit, your victories on land, on sea. Style, he says, is the ultimate morality of mind. Stick cinnamon is 34 cents. Oh, turmeric of use in mustard, chow chow, piccalilli sauces, where the color. Yellow is thought desirable, for that is life, to blaze with color. One ignores the gossip, rounds the bend, dances and ducks and jabs and bites the blade. Pleasant days. There's a tone-free bullet. Someone cycles away. Something strums, not tree, not airplane, not scene. I stop, not entirely to pieces. I flow in litter of sunflower seeds. The whole path of a material particle between any limits of time must achieve some perfection worthy of the providence of God. Everything I have has an earwig in it, which will make light of sacred things, a genuine form being seen, a light and things, some kisses being exchanged amid the whirl of the maddening dance. Joy now is high-wired joy. I'm about to go to the other book, but also this one. Only wanting to be clear and for you, so I sit, abolishing sentences. They're un-American and I'm Californian. Only wanting to be clear and for you, you so-called from its habit of the sky while singing, which on the window just stopped raining. And that was written in Battersea, London. My neighbor upstairs is dropping things on the ceiling. I don't know if you can hear that. No, you don't hear it. Okay.
Yes.
This book is 636 pages long. The Speak Angel series. It's composed of 6 books. And it's a long narrative poem, and it's mostly fictional, but somewhere in the middle, there are a lot of things that aren't very fictional. And the narrator is I, and is sort of myself, but is on the other hand a character. And there's no way for me to explain anything. So I'm going to read some poems from the last book, which is called The Poem, and it's composed of 4 books. And I'm going to read these poems from book 2, which is called You Forgot to Think. So, I is in a space that's like the afterlife, talking to dead people, and you will recognize some of these people. Joe Brainerd is here, Rudy Burckhardt is here, Allen Ginsberg is here. Arthur Rimbaud is here, and some people that aren't named. Later then, Joe shows me his new work, The Soul of a Pansy. Dark around a pansy shape, inside which it's black, white, blank, not paint, just white. The work's not 2-dimensional. 3, it's thick in a frame, floats, but it's not virtual either. It's tangible in a death way with some blur. What are the materials, I ask? I fix the particles. They exist here, you see, with your mind, a several, not sure how many, dimensional icon. It's partly created by your seeing it, but that was always the case. Your mental eyes help fix it. It comes to let you look. And if you count the dimensions, it becomes more fixed. I prefer it less fixed. That's realer. Is it a thing? It's in my mind and then yours. Where do you get the pigment if that's what it is? From my mind, and I draw with my mind, more as if with eyes than with hands, though I have neither. Everything in the alive world was like paint. Everything in the death world is mind. Is everything in death that there is something else, something like an object that can be visualized? I mean, is everything based on life? No, he says, life is based on death. The pansy soul was here first, not the pansy, but the pansy soul. I say, prefer the way it looks here, unfixed as I am, except for being. Particles. I'm now in the world of particles, blank white, like the pansy soul. Nothing but them here, and I become them, smothered, formless, disappearing. Later, much later, there are, did I put them, pink lines around layers of white particles, as if there have to be areas. Finally, particles with more organized and cursive pink lines become a storefront. It may be Saint somethings, a sweeter place you'll never see. In this process of transfiguring, when I forgot to think, I just thought. Take whatever's inside me that you need. I am mostly the new particles. She can't witch me not knowing the new particles. I'm still not sure who she is. There's always been someone who wanted to kill me. Is this real enough, someone says. In this part, it has to be opaque, I say. Out of the different medium, out of the different nirvana, we are really doing this now. Shadow puppets, back away. It's too pure, they shout. They are just shadows, those people. Who you are, what you don't know. That's what I never knew. Wind came, I became that. What about nerves and pain? Gone in an instant. What you are was what you never knew. That's the title. What was this substance? My body and I inhabited my soul in and out of its smallest bits and alternates, this vibratory act, that I was that act by unconscious. Who are you, I say? What you don't know, that's what I never knew, the dead voice says. Wind, hurricane came. No, I read that wrong. What was this substance? My body I inhabited, my soul in and out of its smallest bits and alternates, the vibratory act, that I was that act, my unconscious. Who are you, I say? What you don't know, that's what. I never knew the dead. That's what I never knew, the dead voice says. What you don't know, that's what I never knew, the dead voice says. Wind, hurricane came, I became that. As for nerves and pain, gone in an instant. Who are you? What you never knew? The old folk song. Why did I live? Why was there life? What is this substance? I am now, he says. I left that part of me behind, the folk song says, and came unto this town to sing with no mouth. The unconscious, my soul was so united to my flesh, it told it to be still so I could sleep. It fought to leave when I died. Now it's conscious. I'm the conscious, but I remember that life almost as if I lived it. Were the nerves and pain the only thing real in it? Living establishes memory. That's as far as I can get now. Alice, what was the memory I removed from my brain when I left that self mired in group delusion, mass hallucination? I, Alice, say, the living must know they are hallucinating the world, the known. That we remember the fantasy is all of it we need to know. Rudy says, I photograph my thoughts. I don't just have them. I look at them through a special lens in my mind I possess, as if I brought my camera as part of my mind, and I take pictures. That's how I think. And I saw it, say, Michael Brown's soul. Like a thought, it moved like blown together pieces, darkish but squares and shapes of fabric that pulsate, something like a face, about or above this form smiling. And I take its picture. It's all in me. Sometimes the soul is a sound, but I see it. I see its pulses and hear words I somehow photograph. I am your change, or the song telepathized. Let me show you each word in several languages superimposed. So you see each. You see its motion. How? My mind sees what one says because that's what's here. And if illiterate, you see and hear angular lines and flashes of light, images you recall from life with small differences now. Part of the window, I remember it, but several blurred ones on top of each other, or is it a rolling blur? There was someone leaning on the sill, elbow, forearms, hand, cheek to palm. We're supposed to be touching each other and holding each other's babies. What do you need to remember from life? That you cared, Alan says. As for the bone pointing, the bewitching, he says it's part of the larger pattern of your fate or role in universal history. It, the bones or spells, the primitive aggression against you by peers was foreseen by the dead, though not arranged. This negative energy has made you strong against it, but they could still kill you. Do they know they want to? Not precisely. They like their silky malice, but never think it's that. But what precisely are they doing, I say? Alan says, there are several separate people think unconsciously that they'd like you to be dead, not knowing you're always here and empowered by us. But they do also want to strip you of all semblance of genius and virtue. They don't want you to be who you are and will be. Many of the sorrowful events in your life are connected to the bad mind of others. Others did not want you specifically to succeed at your art or love. The poison becomes stronger. You live in isolation, you become sick, or your beloveds die, or your aesthetic is derided. The bone was pointed long ago by more than one, not paranoia, but how Earth is run. The identities of the malefactors can change. There are several living people who wish you dead. I think it's just two more. I don't want to lie. Rambo says, this translated into English, I can do the spells too. I remember, but from here, I remember people fucked with each other's minds, as you would say, out in the sticks. I think I am, as soul, too objective. I have observed my life, found it wanting, almost forgotten. I don't want, though, your so paltry enemies to win. Am I childish? We could cast more spells or strengthen your position. Do I have one? I'm trying still to get rid of some things from my life, he says. I don't remember my crime, but its intensity hurts like a malignancy with sharp nails in me. I pull it out there because I have a purpose for it. Eat a little raw image, shove the rest through the grid, and you will defeat them. Will I know I've defeated them? I don't know. Hands me the writhing image. I don't want to lie. I don't. This is happening somehow. I bite down on it. Tastes like coffee, saliva, mine, and maybe insect carapace. I know the spells, he says. They are mental. You've given me a hint of malice? No, because it's you. I've given you a certain sight, a second sight. so you could see your enemies as they are. Give them nothing until they are dead. Believe that they are maleficent friends and colleagues. Is this true? And I am freed of that demon, he says. I thought I still needed it. You are an agent, duly friends. From the truth of the opaque, I stop, turning away and face night, dead in my mind, but a clinger. If you wage extensive war, snap to cable, can you hear me? She walks towards a hut on a seacoast flat and enters. There's writing on these close walls, which expand really to envelop you invisibly so you can be cured, characterized now by the foolishness of quotidian chores wherever you are. There is no mercy. There are only laws of compliance to people exactly like you, except for within me. There you need do nothing. As I whisper lines that affect you bodily, we will do this ignoring else. You could find a sand dollar. You don't even have to listen. Just stay in here, coming back. You have returned to the primal site without approval of external agency. You are the agent. Do you feel that? Or it is our electrical connection. There are always moments in between moments where you don't have to suffer. I show you pulses to slide between, or I show you how to be a sound wave, the flexile, your soul.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope people are willing to take a few questions, and I'd like to invite people to unmute themselves, but because there's more than one screen here and I can't see everyone, to ask them if you'd put questions into the chat, and then I would call on you. Beautiful reading by both of you. One thing, Alice, I wonder, in Reason and Other Women and in the early poems, there is this recurring lyricism, often interrupted, especially in Reason and Other Women, but still coming back, that's made of rhythmical alliances, sound correspondences, sometimes rhyme, sometimes all that together. And I hear much less of that kind of lyricism in the long last part.
Oh, there is that kind of lyricism in some of the other of the 6 books.
Okay.
Two of the books. The first book is very narrative, but has long lines. The second book is like an opera. The third book and this book are written kind of in the Alet's measure. The fourth book is all kind of lyrical poems. The fifth book is collaged lyric. So, I mean, it's all different throughout. I encourage people to buy it if they can stand to carry it.
And buy those directly from the press. You said it was photo.
What did I? It's Fonograf Editions. It's available from SPD. It's available from Amazon, but you can also probably write to the publisher and get him to tell you what to do. But it's Fonograf Editions. It's Jeff Alessandrelli, who's living in Portland, and so it's another Western small press enterprise. But he's doing a lot of books right now, and he started out doing vinyl records.
Okay, Fonograf.
Right now, actually, you can get money off on these books plus the vinyl record called Alice Notley Live in Seattle. It was like a jazz book, like a jazz record.
And if you open the chat, David Hurst just put a link to Fonograf Editions in there. And,
oh, good.
And Eleni spelled it, Fono.
Yes, F. Well, all lowercase.
Okay. And there's a question.
Yes.
There's a question to Alice from Ken Bow. Ken, do you want to unmute yourself and ask that directly, or I can ask it for you? Well, he says, what is the role of fantasy in your poetry?
Can you hear me all right?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Where are you?
Okay, thank you. Let me, I just a name up here on in one of these boxes.
Oh, yeah.
I live in Bisbee, Arizona. And
oh, hello.
My question is, oh, hello. I was invited by Meg Swade, who's in this chat also. What is the role of fantasy in your poetry, Alice? Not in the sense of speculative poetry, which is sometimes called fantasy, but in the sense of actual daydream level imagination, you know, when we have, you know, these different fantasies. I want to differentiate that from this kind of genre.
There's no fantasy in my work. There's no fantasy. there's a lot of dream. And probably mostly the things that people would call fantasy, might call fantasy, are actually based on what dreaming is like, because I'm very interested in dream and how it isn't fantasy. I don't know what it is. And when I have things that don't seem to belong in the real world, I am probably working on some either out of dream or out of the visionary tradition, or out of the my own visionary tradition.
Yes, like when one's in a hypnagogic state of mind and these images appear.
Yeah, yeah. Like, where do they come from? You know, they're not, it's not fantasy. That's not fantasy. Fantasy is like just sitting, making things up. And I never do that exactly. What do you think, Adam?
Right.
Do you ever make anything up? I can't hear you. You're muted. He's muted.
Oh, Ken, she was asking you if you ever make anything up.
No, I asked Adam.
Oh, you asked Adam.
And
Adam,
he was muted.
unmute yourself. I'll try to get him to unmute himself.
He was talking and he was muted.
There.
No, I do write fantasy. I mean, I'm actually.
You write surrealism.
Yeah, no, I write. Yeah,
but that's not fantasy.
I tried. No, it's not fantasy. It's oniric. It's like like the hypnagogic state. And what happens is that I digest enormous volumes of stuff about science, and then that blends with my everyday experience, and this stuff just comes out. I mean, you know, but because I also work with technology a lot, like that Radio Waves poem, I was moved to think about what radio has meant in people's lives since the 1930s, when it was the, you know, medium other than print. And then I was thinking, okay, we all have these little radio sets that we call mobile phones, and we're using those, and underlying it is the same physics. It's just that instead of it being all coming from these enormous institutions, you know, it's all coming from each to each. It's a distributed thing. And then that struck me because my beloved at the time called me on her cell phone, and it all kind of fused. It as often happens in my poems, is that everything tapers down to a moment. And yeah, so but my original teachers are Blake and the surrealists, and so it's not, yeah, it's imagination. It's not fantasy.
I remember the radio, and I remember vast amounts of imagination in it. And I remember riding through the Arizona desert in 1949 with my parents in a car, and this program called The Whistler coming on, and he would whistle, and then he would make a speech, and it would be kind of scary. I would be lying in the back, and Amos and Andy would come on. And I had no idea what that was about or where it was coming from, and why there was somebody named Sapphire, why there were people named Sapphire and the Kingfisher. It was
Yeah, I mean,
it was all voice. It was all voice.
yep. And voice allowed you to imagine.
Voice creates imagination and sound and story, and it does all kinds of magical things.
And I got, this is the BBC Home Service.
Ah, yes.
It was a bit more formal and much less commercial, you know, but you know, we would cluster around the wireless, as it was called.
I used to listen to the comic strips being read on the radio, which is a really weird idea because they're comic strips and you're supposed to be looking at them. There was a guy who came on the radio every Sunday and read the Sunday comic strips. And he read the ones that we didn't get in Needles. So I would listen to him reading Maggie and Jigs. And it was an amazing experience. I've never forgotten it.
Yeah, Philip Lamantia had a great article. Philip was by way of being a friend of mine and an enormous influence, speaking of surrealists. And he had a great essay on listening to the radio as a kid and how much that expanded his imagination. Stuff like The Shadow and, you know.
Shadow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who knows what evil lurks in the heart of men?
Oh, Ghost Who Walks.
Yes.
There's a couple more questions in the chat, and one of them is from Heller Levinson, and the other one from Eleni Sikelianos. Heller, do you want to go first and ask?
Sure. Thank you, Adam and Alice, for the reading, and Charles for hosting. You triggered a question, Alice, on fantasy, because your notion is it's a made-up thing, and I'm wondering, isn't there a fantasy that overtakes us? In other words, the very current culture we're living in often seems fantastical in its own right. Even being surrounded by this plethora of digital devices, that's a whole nother type of fantasy, and the coming artificial intelligence. So I just want to explore the idea of fantasy in a vaster sense.
Well, maybe you're talking about illusion and delusion, and I guess I don't ever use the word fantasy, or I mean, people have fantasies. I know they have them when they're lying around thinking, you know, but I associate the word with daydreams and
I guess what I'm talking about
comic books and the Marvel universe and things like that.
I guess what I'm referring to is the idea of being afflicted by a fantasy, not delusion or illusion, but just the fantastical circumstances one can find oneself in. That's a whole nother discussion, I guess. Okay.
Well, I mean, I have written volumes on the fact that this world doesn't exist. If that's
Well
what you
said.
mean. I mean, nobody sees properly. Adam and I are both saying that we come out of Blake, which means we believe we are led to believe a lie when we see with, not through the eye, born in the night, to perish in the night while the soul slept in beams of light.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just add that, I've written some stuff about surrealism and its history and what's happened now. And I developed a category I called the permissible fantastic, which I think is the enemy of the marvelous, although Marvel Comics is called Marvel. The marvelous, Louis Aragon defined as the eruption of contradiction within the real. In other words, showing us that the smoothing over of all of the lumps and cracks and holes in what we think of as reality is conducted by what Aragon calls the real. It's in the back of Paris Peasant. It's called La Rêve du Paysan. I think that this enormous volume of fantasy building on fantasy and these great long narratives of fantastical beings that now are streaming on all these channels that we're meant to watch, I find them utterly insipid. I can't watch them. I would love for there to be something genuinely, and I will use that word, speculative, that isn't a compensation for the poverty of everyday life. And I don't want to be compensated for its poverty. I want to change it.
That's well said, Adam. I appreciate that. That's the affliction I'm talking about. Fantastical affliction.
Maybe we could get to Eleni's question. You had a question about voice?
Yes, I love what you both just said about fantasy and sort of crystallizing versions of reality. But yeah, I was interested in, Alice, your comment that voice creates imagination, and just thinking so much about your voicing. And Adam, you seem to agree with the voice creating imagination. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
It's what children do.
Mm.
They make up things using their voice, and it comes automatically out of them, and they say things, and then they say these words, and then they laugh, and then they make up stories, but they're playing with their voices while they do it at the same time as they're playing with words. And I suppose I do that. I use the voice to create things, and I go where the voice takes me usually.
Yeah,
and I think of myself as working on an epic of voice a lot of the time now, and almost everything I write is in dialogue. There are always people talking to each other, and I'm always having to do things about the word. He says, she says, I say. It's quite problematical trying to make it be in rhythm, in a kind of flow, but it's hard to show that there's more than one voice there sometimes. That's the kind of writing problem I have now.
Yeah.
Everything is talking, everything is held together by communication, and that's what all the atoms and particles and waves, and that's what the light is doing. And we're all part of this communication that makes everything exist together. We are holding it up, all of us.
Yeah,
By everything we do, and so we're all talking in some way, and we're talking to the rocks, and we're talking to the tree, and they're talking back, and and we're all talking back and forth, holding the universe, the cosmos up.
Yes.
What I was saying to Charles before we started is that I've been paying a lot of attention as I sort of shift. I've kind of done all I can without learning the math with respect to things like quantum physics. And I'm no longer, if I ever was, capable of doing the math. So what I've been paying a lot of attention to is the new biology, which is all about communication and information. That's what's happening in biology. It started with DNA and understanding that we contained this information encoded in a molecule that was then able to duplicate itself and create new molecules, and that those molecules, which are amino acids, would organize into proteins and then fold themselves into these incredibly complex shapes, all of which have function. That geometry also is at the heart of life, which is an insight my dad would have loved, because he loved
Plain
geometry.
or solid?
Yeah.
Plain or solid geometry? I always liked plain and not solid.
Yeah, it's solid in a sense, but it's about folding. It's like that proteins are a kind of origami, and if they fold wrong, they don't do what they're supposed to do, and they can cause all kinds of trouble. But the other thing is, is that all our cells are talking to each other in our bodies all the time, and that includes talking to all the bacteria and knowing whether the bacteria are good or bad bacteria, and interrogating them and instructing each other on how to deal with everything else, like in the immune system, and training each other. Cells are doing that all the time. You and I are alive because of communication. And now I just discovered there's a field called biosemiotics, which is about the notion that signs are not limited to human beings, but that signs are innate in nature. I'm just starting to read an anthology of stuff about biosemiotics.
I'm not sure there's signs. I think there's another name for all of this. I'm trying to find a new language for talking about all of this.
Well, that would be great. We're poets. It's our job. If we can't find it.
No, it's what I'm trying to do right now.
Yeah.
Because I think we somehow everything speaks some language that we don't have access to anymore. I call it the old language in capital T, capital O, capital L, and I keep searching for it.
Mhm.
Well, I love the way in your work, Adam, one system lays over another and another. Even when you called photons in one work the original currency, and I think of that as electrical currency going through everything, but also economic currency, the original currency. So,
Well, they're fungible.
Yeah.
One photon is as good as another. They're exactly. You cannot distinguish them, and so that's why I said they were the reserve currency of the universe. Because that way of thinking, that capitalist way of thinking, has infiltrated our minds, and rather than try to shut it out, I just want to let it be there, and interact with what we know that is entirely prior and external to, and will last long after things like capitalism, or us for that matter. But the eye on the eternal, I guess you would call it, because if there's one thing that's eternal, it's a photon.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a beautiful talk in the New Weathers anthology, the Naropa anthology, by Peter Warshall about color communication, and one of our most ancient discussions is with color, and that's completely interspecies,
The strangest thing is that which I got from my favorite science writer, who has a book now called An Immense World, which is a quote from Blake, about animal senses. And it's noted that the cephalopods who can change color and do all the time don't seem to be able to actually read their own colors.
Yes.
So what are the colors for? Who are they talking to? What does it mean?
We can't see ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, one has never really seen oneself. Being in the world is all about being seen rather than seeing oneself. I mean, being seen and seeing the other, but you are not visible to yourself. Parts of you are, but you never know what you look like.
Right, and I'm always startled when I discover I accidentally get a glimpse of what I really look like.
That's what we need the other for, to show us who we are.
We have a request, and I would second it for Eleni. Could you put the title of that anthology with that Peter Warshall article in the chat?
Yeah, it's the anthology from Naropa that came out with Nightboat. Alice has an essay in there on dreams.
Yes, dreams, but I don't have a copy of the book.
Oh, okay, well.
Tell Anne, I told her.
Okay, I'll tell her.
I don't have one.
All right, I'll tell her immediately. And Adam, could you put the title of the book you mentioned? And there's another book that Peter Godfrey Smith about cephalopod communication that's amazing. But
hang on a sec, I've got to look it up. It's in me Kindle. Hang on. Oh, go away with you. It's very hard to get out of Google Docs once you're in Google Docs. I sort of live there right now. Okay, now fold up. Here we go. Kindle, library. The one about animal communication. I got to type into the chat here.
David Hertz just said something.
Yes, that's right. I've been meaning to read this book.
That's the one. That's the one.
Okay. Ed Young. Yes.
Yeah, Ed Young. Yeah. It is actually Young. He's Chinese American, or Chinese English, I guess. Actually, Chinese British. And then the previous book, which I am longing to get to, when I get done with this one, is I contain multitudes. I think that one of the things that's happening, which I have never been comfortable with the normal, I suppose one would say, bourgeois definition of the self. I've never felt that I was singular, and that self in me is plural and contingent. at all times. And to discover that there is a biological basis to this way of feeling is lovely. I don't want to be singular. I'd much rather be
Possible to be
plural and have,
both.
yeah, well, I suppose there's some kind of convergence. But the fact that I am also plural and that I am interconnected with my environment constantly in all these different ways, all these different kinds of communication is absolutely beautiful to me. So the more I can find out about that, the better. And there's actually a poem I'm trying to write, which I cannot finish writing until I actually know the science well enough to do it. Which I suppose a silly way to think, but it's happening to me. Because a lot of the stuff that I used to write about when I was young is no longer of relevance, but all this terribly is.
To
I
keep
think-
being these messages flashing.
Yeah, there are some messages flashing.
Yeah, no, I got sidetracked.
Different links. So, and Casper Lee says he'd love to hear more about the old language Alice is searching for. I think, well, maybe that would be the last comment if Alice wants to speak to that. And then we'll...
I don't know if I know what to say because I keep going round and round in circles with it, and I've been referring to it for about 10 years now, and I can't organize my manuscripts because I can't find where I'm being repetitious. There is a way of communication, and it's not just words, and I don't believe that words are just words. I think words are completely interconnected with everything, and that language is an interconnection, and words are not clean things, and when they are, and when the writer tries to make them be, it's really boring. There is a language that isn't a language, and we all speak it, and there's no way for me to identify it, but I am looking for it, but it's in everything we do. It's everything we are, and it's how we relate, and how we relate in order to hold up the world, being ourselves gravity in some way, or being part of what gravity and memory are. Memory being remembering to be. I mean, for anything to exist, it has to remember to be existing, or are we like just by, if the world ceases to exist, if this planet ceases to exist, then there might not be human language anymore.
Right.
But what is there if this planet ceases to exist? And there is something, and I don't believe that we die, but everybody knows that I'm like that. But I believe that after death we go to this afterworld where these people do talk to me. I mean, they do talk to me, and there is some form of life holding everything up and holding it all together, and we are all holding it together.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just talk about it being these scientific things, and then you just give it to more of those people called experts. Like every day you pick up the newspaper, and there's no journalism anymore, and they just say experts say. Well, fuck them. They don't exist, and nobody names them. It's this really silly idea.
Yeah. Have you ever heard Laurie
There
Anderson's
are
record?
us. There are us, and we are doing it, and we are the same as rocks and plants and air and non-air and light and whatever. I mean, we're all the same thing, holding it all together, being lace.
Holding it all together, or putting it back together, which literally is remembering, which doesn't only include what exists that I can touch, but all those
You have,
in the past.
I mean, there's memory involved in anything being at all.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, although there's this word Ursprache, which I think might be Heidegger, but I'm not sure because I'm terrible at philosophy. I'm what they call a concrete thinker. I have a really hard time following philosophy. I tried to read Hegel once, got about like 5 pages in and completely lost it.
There,
But Ursprache means the original speech, right?
Heidi just said the universe is a memory.
That it is.
Universal speech. Ursprache. Sprache.
Right. That's the one.
Ursprache.
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 Respect.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to call this a day with Ursprache and invite you all in maybe two days or so to look on find on the Chax YouTube channel this existing again if you want to listen to it. And I don't know, I know I get sent a text of the chat with all these wonderful things. I might try to put the links together too in something I could send out or put online. But thank you, Alice. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, everybody, for coming. What a great event.